Hello, everybody, and welcome back to FilmograFeed, the show where we break down somebody's filmography, showing their ups, their downs, and their don't look nows. I'm your host, Caleb Little Butt Boatman, and today we're talking Barry Levinson still. Last week we talked about The Diner, so if you missed that episode, be sure to watch that. But today we're talking about The Natural, Barry Levinson's second feature. And with me, as always, is my co-host, Caleb Koho. Caleb, how are you feeling?
Feeling good, Caleb. This was one I was excited to do for this, and I'm really disappointed to report that I don't have a lot of thoughts about The Natural. We were talking about that earlier. It's interesting that like after making a period buddy hangout comedy, he's like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm going to make a freaking period baseball murder movie. And that sounds rad, and then it's not as rad at all. But
to be fair, yeah, we'll kind of jump into the context here. So this film was based on a novel by Bernard Malamud. And basically, from what it seems, Levinson was kind of a hired gun on this because this was in production since like 1976, and it got kind of tossed around with a few different directors, and then they got Robert Redford. This was one of the first films from TriStar Pictures, which
what was the last movie Redford was in before this?
He had not done a movie in 3 years. He did, I believe, Brubaker was the last time he had done a movie.
Okay, so he literally hadn't made a movie since like he like won the Oscar and then just shows up.
Yeah, he won the Oscar for Ordinary People, and he had also like done Brubaker that same year. And then, like, he just kind of went into a hole and didn't come back until The Natural.
He was like, I'm gonna just hang out with my Oscar and watch the world burn, and then decide, yeah, sure, I'll come be a baseball ghost.
Yeah, basically. So we'll just kind of jump into this. The Natural is about this guy, Roy Hobbs, played by Robert Redford, who is kind of being touted, he kind of comes out of nowhere, and he's being touted as probably going to be one of the best baseball players there ever was. And things start to, he shows off his prowess, and then he runs into this reporter played by Robert Duvall, who, I don't know about you, Koho, I actually think Robert Duvall is actually pretty good in this.
I actually think it's really weird in like the early 80s and late 70s throughout, Robert Duvall having this incredible career, and then like he's on his way to winning an Oscar. Robert Duvall's going to be one of the guys that wins the Oscar at some point, and he wins it, I think, either the year before.
He won it the year before this.
Okay, so every time they give the Oscar to someone, they usually give them that one after nomination where it's like, yeah, we're going to justify that you deserve to win. Mm-hmm. And it's weird that it wasn't this. Like, this is like one of those movies where it's like, it's weird that he's like as good as he is in this, which is a very Oscar-y kind of movie.
Oh, they loved this movie. They gave it 4 nominations.
They like loved it enough to give it 4 nominations. You think that they'd be like, here, Robert Duvall, Best Supporting Actor nomination. And like the narrative of Robert Redford's first movie, you'd think Redford would have gotten nominated for this movie. There's a lot of like, you almost think that this movie maybe underperformed at the Oscars with some of the stories that you hear about people coming out of the woodworks to make it, that maybe they missed a couple of nominations that they could have gotten because the movie's not as good as it could have been.
I think the other factor that is that 1984 is like just a really good year for movies. So I think that's part of it, is you look at those nominations and it kind of makes sense why, like, I get why Redford didn't get in. Duvall, interesting though that you said that, because after he won for Tender Mercies, he didn't get nominated until like 15 years later when The Apostle came out in 1997.
I hear he's like great in The Apostle.
I have also heard he's great in The Apostle, but it's just very interesting.
And then he's not nominated again until he is an old man.
No, that's
shitting in a tub.
Not true.
Oh, it's not the
nominated for a civil action the next year.
Oh, the next year. And then he doesn't get nominated until he starts shitting in bathtubs of the judge.
That is true. But yeah, no, I think that so Duvall plays this reporter, and I think Duvall, one of the best things about this movie, Duvall playing this reporter, and he's kind of skeptical of him, and Roy Hobbs kind of comes up against this bet that he can strike out this noted baseball player at the time, nicknamed the Whammer. Robert Redford wins the bet. And he also meets this young woman played by Barbara Hershey, who in kind of the movie's first big twist, even though it comes like 15 minutes in the movie, when he says that, hey, I'm going to be the best that there ever was, she then shoots him.
That was such a weird moment. Like, I knew that, like, the things about this, which I'm going to bring up something right now that you're going to, like, eye roll and get irritated about. But, like, can we talk about how, like, this whole segment is, like, really weird and jarring, but the actual edit itself, where he gets shot and is laying there, and you kind of vaguely hear voices, and then it's black, and then 16 years later, that exact edit is in The Sixth Sense. Like, that exact edit is the opening of The Sixth Sense. Like, it is, though. Like, the same, like, it's almost, I had to go look up The Sixth Sense again just to make sure. But it's, like, an identical edit. It's, like, an identical edit. Which is so weird.
No, you're not wrong.
It is. Like, him laying there and it going to black after he gets shot. And then the text comes on screen in, like, similar font, similar color, and same movement. And it's so weird. And it comes back to, like, wide shot, which is the same thing as The Sixth Sense. It's, like, a really weird, like, moment where you're just, like, two movies have a very similar vibe at points. Like, they have a very similar aesthetic in that moment where they do that edit. It's really interesting. It's just
I also think what's interesting is that, like, that character doesn't really come back.
No, and, like, that's the thing. They don't really explain who she is, why she did that, or what happens to her until, like, we just see pictures of her dead later in the movie.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, what the fuck? And then it's like, oh yeah, she killed herself. And it's like, did she? Do we know that? What's going on, Robert Redford?
It is a very out of, like, nowhere thing to make the movie happen. Yeah. And then that's, like, you'd think, okay, this guy's been shot, so that's what the movie's going to be about. It's really not. It's
such a weird, it's such a weird, like, utterly unimportant thing that doesn't come back to, like, the very end. It's like, it's that thing where, like you said, you'd think the movie would be about this guy then, with no memory of who he is or where he comes from, shows up again after 16 years later and just is really good at baseball. But then why wouldn't anyone know that this guy 16 years ago, who is, like, a legend of baseball, is back playing baseball until, like, the end of the movie, where they then blackmail him with the fact that he's dead? Like, they try to blackmail him with, like, you're supposed to be dead and that this woman was dead with you. Like, what a weird movie. What a weird movie.
It's a really weird script, and we'll kind of get into that specifically when we talk about the ending, because this movie was based on a book. And I looked into some of the differences between the movie and the book, and the book is very different, specifically the ending. But in a lot of aspects.
You mean he doesn't hit out the lights like every great baseball movie?
No, he does not hit out the lights. So we'll kind of move on. Then he comes back and he joins this baseball team called the New York Knights. That's kind of a
we do see their pennant on his wall earlier in the movie.
That's true. Yes. And he's kind of fledgling. And I will say one of my favorite parts of this movie, the coach. I really like Wilford Brimley in this.
I had to stop for a second because in my head I know what he sounds like and I know what all the impressions of him are, but I had to remember, like, and think about, do I actually know what he looks like? And then when he showed up, I was like, that's Wilford Brimley, right? Am I like, I'm not making that up? And that was, like, weird. That was a weird moment.
I'll be honest, it's weird that you had to do that because I feel like Wilford Brimley looks exactly what, even if you have never seen a picture or heard a video or anything of Wilford Brimley looks like the idea of the name.
Oh, he does. And that's the reason why, like, I had to take that moment where I'm like, is this guy Wilford Brimley or am I just assuming this guy's Wilford Brimley?
That's fair. But no, I like him as the coach. I think he's like very I think Wilford Brimley is very good at playing frustrated.
That's like his one mode. Like, he's just always angry.
Wilford Brimley is always just disappointed dad. That is like his mode. But the thing is that he's really good at doing it. Like, I don't know. You've never seen Absence of Malice, right?
I have not. Wasn't he nominated for that?
He was not, but he should have not only been nominated, but won. That is a movie you need to see at some point. But Wilford Brimley basically gets one scene in that movie, and he comes in and he plays disappointed dad on everybody, and it's the best scene in the movie.
I love that, actually.
You need to watch that. Like,
I've tried to start it a few times, and then something always happens every time I try to watch The Verdict.
That's fair.
It's kind of funny.
Yeah, no, like Absence of Malice.
Or Absence of Malice, not The Verdict.
Yeah, you've seen The Verdict, I thought.
I have no. I've started The Verdict like 3 or 4 times and never been able to get through it because something has happened. We've talked about this before.
That's a problem on both accounts. You need to watch
it's not that I had to like stop because I was bored. It's that thing where I was just like, oh, I've started it, and then something happens where I can't finish the movie that moment.
You know what? That's fair. There are a few movies like that for me. But no, that's fair. So anyway, then it just kind of continues on, and I don't want to hit every beat of this movie, but basically then he reconnects with Glenn Close, who is his former lover. And I think
we talked about this too, just how weird it is that she got nominated for this movie.
Yes. I think that I think Close is good. I think that's good. It's a weird performance to kind of center on because she doesn't have she doesn't get the big Oscar scene, basically.
Right.
Like, you can argue like the scene in the hospital, but even that, it's not like a phenomenal performance by any stretch of the imagination, I would say.
It's not a very like Oscar-y performance either. It just like exists.
Yeah. It's a very weird performance that got attention. And then you kind of see Hobbs, he gets kind of tied in with these gamblers who want him to throw the game. And I do like that one scene. I like that scene with where he has dinner with the gambler played by Darren McGavin, the dad from A Christmas Story. Yeah. I do like that scene. And I feel like there's a really good movie, like a great movie buried under here, right? Because I think like there's something really interesting going on with the woman shooting baseball player. That could be a movie. And then there's kind of an interesting thing going on with like the underworld of this baseball gambling and the underworld of this organization. But I think this is kind of the problem of the movie. This movie wants to be so like uplifting and nostalgic and whimsical that it won't really let itself be anything else.
Yeah, it's a really weird. It's odd. It's like the movie has so many different directions it's pulling itself in, and I feel like all of them would be a little bit more interesting than where they go.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree. There's a lot of like, there's just a lot of like interesting little characters and little performances. But it feels like the movie is so focused on just being this very like whimsical, uplifting sports story that it won't let itself be that. So let's just kind of skip ahead to the finale because I think this is probably the most like memorable thing about the movie. This is the thing. Like this is the thing I knew before I saw this movie. He's in this position. And he's been injured and he's coming back into play and the bat breaks and he's been struck out and he's up against this hot shot pitcher and then he comes in and he gets the home run and it shatters the legs.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that scene is a really good scene.
That's the moment, like we made fun of it earlier, but like that's like a scene that genuinely is like I felt that's like the first time in the movie where I felt like that swell that the movie wants you to, especially when the Randy Newman score hits, which we need to talk about. Randy Newman's score.
I want to talk about that. I want to focus on the ending a little bit, and then we'll kind of move
but
to
the music under it like helps underscore like you have the swell and the whole arena just like losing it. Like, it's a great moment in sports. It's, like, the only real, like, great sports movie moment of this sports movie, which is wild.
I don't. What? So, what do you think? Like the main problem is here for why, like the rest. Why doesn't the rest of the movie feel like that?
I think the reason why is because they have 5 different movies happening at once. And I think like the main, if they wanted this to be a regular sports baseball movie about an older guy who comes into the league and lights it on fire and does great, that would have been a really fun sports movie that has its own entertaining challenges of a guy who's significantly older than the rest of the players that comes in and has to prove himself. I think that makes for an entertaining story. I think I think baseball and the murder death plot almost have nothing to do with each other. And if you could find a way to consolidate them more or have it make sense where like the murder is directly like affecting how is he alive? How did he survive the gunshot? How is he back? Which is a thing that I don't think they ever really fully make explicitly explained.
They don't make it clear. There might be a few lines of dialogue, but they don't make it clear.
Right. And it's the thing where it's like, if this was literally about a ghost who came back and like fulfilled his sports dreams, that's also a more interesting movie than what they did. And then like the element of being blackmailed works if the crime element of this is the main component and then baseball's ancillary. It feels like they made too many movies in one. Like the love story doesn't really work to me. I think Robert Redford and Glenn Close have good chemistry, but it just doesn't connect to the rest of what's happening. Like it just does. It feels like they have too many ideas and too many like thoughts as to what the movie should be. That if you want this to be like a great baseball sports movie, they should have just made a great sports baseball movie. There's like a lot of great templates for that they were like, we're going to put too much into this movie.
I want to posit something here. I think, honestly, cut out the first 20 minutes of this movie. The movie starts after the 16 years later. Like, actually, no. Keep him finding the Wonder Boy bat and yada, yada, yada. You can have that in, or you can do that in a flashback or whatever. But cut out all the Barbara Hershey stuff. Cut out the Barbara Hershey stuff. If you want to reference that later on in the movie, that's fine. Because that's part of the problem, is that it's like part of like the tension is Robert Duvall going to figure out this mystery that's going on? Well, we know the mystery. We know what happened. So there's no real tension there in terms of what?
We sort of know what happened. We don't really know what happened. We know the event. We don't know how. The mystery for us is how is there a movie after the 16 years later card?
I mean, yeah, and even then, that's not really resolved.
And there's never resolved. They don't care about that.
No, but I'm saying cut out the actual Barbara Hershey scene.
No, with you. Yeah, I'm with you.
And then it's the reveal that the Barbara Hershey thing happened. I actually think that would work.
That would fix the movie a lot. If this guy, I think literally, if you have the Wonder Boy bat sequence, and then you just have him like lifted up title card, and then you pick up where the 16 years later card is, and the whole movie is everyone just being like, this guy just came out of nowhere. We have no record of this guy. Who is this? And the whole movie is like, who is this guy? How is he this good? And that leads people to promptly dig into his background, and that creates the intrigue of this guy is dead. This guy should be dead. And if he's not, then he committed a murder. And like that's like then you have a totally new level where it's like, did he kill Barbara Hershey? Did he die? What happened? And like the end of the second act reveal can be what happened. Like at the end of the second act, we can find out what happened to him, get the scene with Barbara Hershey, whatever. And then the third act has to be like, well, now that we know that, how does this change this guy's big game coming up, and how does this affect him? Even then, I feel like the baseball elements of this aren't as, to me, the baseball elements weren't as interesting as is this guy, what is up with this dead guy element. Mm-hmm. But if you can find, I think you can find a way to marry the two. Like you said, if you make the movie about who is he.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree. But yes, that ending, even if the rest of the movie doesn't really hold together, that is a really great ending. And I think that is partially because I think Levinson is not to blame here. No. I think he directs this movie super well.
I think it looks good, yeah. I
think this movie looks good. I think all the actors are directed well.
Huge shouts out to Caleb Deschanel, who is the cinematographer, who is many time nominee. for many things. I believe he's nominated for The Patriot, one of the more famous ones for me. Last time he was nominated for Never Look Away, 2018, foreign film. So he gets nominated with some frequency, and he's a very he has a very distinct look. Not a lot of depth of field and not a lot of like flashy colors. He just has this like sheen of nostalgia on everything he makes that has this sort of glossy throwback kind of feel, which is like perfect for this movie that like crushes it. I think he's a great cinematographer that does great work on this one.
No, I agree. And I think that's why Levinson was a really good choice to direct it, because I think Levinson, as we've kind of seen, is great at directing nostalgia. He is great at giving you a feel of the past, right? It did it with Diner, did it with this. I think, like, looking at the book, because I kind of alluded to the book changes. The book doesn't have the light-shattering moment. The book, from what I can understand, is kind of like an homage to Homer's The Odyssey. It's supposed to kind of, with Roy Hobbs being Odysseus, and it's supposed to be more like kind of that, but set in the world of baseball. And it's essentially supposed to end with Hobbs has like taken the bribe and is going to take the bribe, and then last minute decides not to, and then he gets struck out, and it's found out that he took that bribe even though he wasn't trying to at that last minute, and he's basically like ruined. And I don't know if that would be a better ending.
I don't like that ending.
I mean, but it's interesting, like, apparently how different, like, apparently the book is like way darker.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really care for that end. I think the ending doesn't even really make that much sense. I mean, it's also just like a really like, wow, that like sucks for him sort of ending. But like, if that was the ending to this movie, I wouldn't care, because like I don't really care about Hobbs. Like, the movie doesn't do a good job of making me care about Robert Redford.
No, they don't give him a lot of actual meat to work with.
Right. So it's like if that was the ending, it wouldn't affect me the way they want it to. The way that them hitting out the lights affects me, because that scene is really well done, and it's like, you know what, good for you, kid. It's like, good for you, Robert Redford.
That's true. No, I think that ending is
I think that was the right choice on Levinson's part.
And yeah, let's talk about that score. That Randy Newman score is just magnificent.
It's
like
it so perfectly captures the feel that I know Levinson really wants for this movie. Like, I think the two best decisions he made when making this movie were hiring Caleb Deschanel to shoot it and Randy Newman to score it, because those two are in sync with the vision of what he wants this movie to be, and he creates this really like wispy, like nostalgic score that just totally like transports you back in time, and like also works really well with the sport of baseball. Like, that's also the hard part, where it's like when you're composing this like for like an old time period piece, and you want to capture what it sounds like back then, but then you also have to make music that sounds like it belongs underneath a scene where people are playing baseball. And I think Randy Newman just nails it on both fronts.
No, that's true. Again, I think Levinson actually directs this well. I don't think this movie is Levinson. I think Levinson is innocent here. I think this is the fault of the script, especially because like Levinson was basically a hired gun, right? You have to remember, dude had only directed one movie at this point. It was Diner, which was not like this massive movie. This was kind of, I think The Natural is kind of like the equivalent to how when like nowadays, if a director has a big indie hit, they're like immediately signed to go direct a studio comic book movie, right? The Natural, it's not anywhere near to this movie's level of badness, but The Natural is to Barry Levinson as Joss Trank is to Fan Forstic. In the sense that
in a weird way, I see what you're saying. It's not a 1-to-1 that makes total sense, but I can see what you're saying, where it's like he made the indie picture that was a hit. He got the Oscar nomination for it. People were like, look out for this guy. And the studio went, hey, we have a project that we really want to do, and we think you'd be good for it.
Maybe a better example is The Amazing Spider-Man. The Amazing
Spider-Man is probably a better choice, yeah.
That's probably more fair. The Natural is his Amazing Spider-Man to Diner's 500 Days of Summer.
Sure.
But yeah, there's not like a perfect 1-to-1 ratio, but you get what I'm saying. Of how like this is his big studio movie to see if he can, for lack of a better term, play ball with the studio. And basically, do you have any more thoughts on The Natural?
I mean, not entirely. Like, I think the thing that I think was shocking to me was when I was watching this movie, right? And Barbara Hershey shows up and is in this, and it's just like Barbara Hershey's in this for that one moment, that one stretch of like 4 minutes, and then nothing else. And I don't know if Barbara Hershey wasn't like a person yet, but that's like kind of insane that Barbara Hershey's just like in this. Also, Michael Madsen is also just like in this. And
to be fair, Michael Madsen definitely was not a person.
No, he's not yet. Like a young Michael Madsen is just like in this, and that was like really funny to see. Where it's like, in less than 10 years, that guy's cutting off a cop's ear. Like, it's kind of a nuts thing to see is young Michael Madsen.
To kind of look into it, I think this was kind of one of the first like notable roles for her.
Okay.
Like she was in Boxcar Bertha with Scorsese, but that was like kind of a trashy, exploitation movie. Even though it was Scorsese, like this was like, so she was in The Right Stuff like the year before, but even then she was.
Okay. She's starting to be a person that we're looking out for in movies.
Yes, this is like her. I'm starting to get famous movie basically.
Okay. I just thought that was so weird. That was like, random Barbara Hershey cameo.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't even think it was really a cameo.
It wasn't supposed to be a cameo. It was just, it is. Because
it's like hiring a sort of recognizable supporting actress at that point.
It was just kind of a weird thing to run into.
All right. Well, before we go, I think we've got two things. First off, who's the MVP of this movie?
I would say Duvall. I would probably put my weight on Duvall. I think Duvall is the performance that I enjoyed the most. Him and his weird mustache are the things that I like most about Robert Duvall. About this movie is Robert Duvall's performance. I would go with him.
That's fair. Okay, so I would also personally say Duvall is my. So this is the first time we both have the same MVP from the movie. So let's bring in all three MVPs that we've had, because last week I had Kevin Bacon, you had Mickey Rourke from Diner.
Right.
Okay. Rank the three of them. Where do the three of them go for you?
I mean, I'd go Rourke, Bacon, Duvall. Like I think Duvall flatly is like the worst of the three performances.
I would agree. I would go Bacon, Rourke, Duvall. So yeah, no, I think we both agree this, and I think I kind of know where you're going with this, and I think you kind of know where I'm going with this. But just to wrap up, step up or step down from Diner?
I think it is a step down from Diner. I think he regresses a little from this movie from the last movie to this one. I'm gonna be completely honest. I think I know what next one's Good Morning Vietnam, right? That's the next one we watch.
It's either that or Tin Men. Actually, no. We've got The Adventures of Young Sherlock Holmes next.
Right. Okay. So there is something entirely.
I'm going to talk about your anticipation for that, but
Which is like I was gonna say, like I think with this, which was a movie I was actually really excited to watch, not living up to the hype for it for me. It was that sort of like I was let down by his sophomore effort. I'm hoping he bounces back on the next one, but like Diner was like a strong start. So I'm starting to think that maybe he never reaches the highs of the first movie. But I think he's going to start stringing together a couple movies that I think are still really good. I don't think The Natural is a bad movie. I just think The Natural is like fine. It's like an okay movie. So I'm hoping that the Adventures of Sherlock, or the Adventures of Young Sherlock Holmes, is that what it is, or it's just the Adventures?
The Young Sherlock Holmes. Sorry,
Sherlock Holmes. Okay, Young Sherlock Holmes. I'm always interested in Sherlock Holmes, so I hope he does a fun thing with an adolescent Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah. I will say, in terms of step down, obviously step down. I will say, though, I don't know if I'm as negative on it as you are in terms of, I think from just a Barry Levinson standpoint, I think this still moved him forward, because this was still a chance for him to kind of show his technical prowess, which I don't think he really got a chance to in Diner. Like, I think having him work with, like, Caleb Deschanel and Randy Newman, like, he got to kind of make more of a spectacle movie. And even I think the script doesn't work, but he didn't write the script. Like, he didn't write this movie. So I think ultimately, I think he's innocent to this. And I think ultimately he got to stretch himself as a director, which I think is a good thing. But yeah, that's about it for The Natural.
Shorter
Next
episode than last week. Yeah.
Yeah, shorter episode, but still 30 minutes. So
Really
not
short.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if people are I'm always for more 30-minute, 45-minute content than longer. No one wants to listen to an hour and 15-minute podcast on The Natural. Like I'm always for this length of content on these types of shows. But anyway, next week we will be covering Young Sherlock Holmes. I have seen this before, but I have not seen this in like a while. I don't think since I was like in middle school. And Koho, how do you think you're going to feel about this movie?
I have never seen this movie. I know very little about it. I know who wrote it, and that's basically it. So I'm intrigued to see Levinson tackle Sherlock Holmes and do a crime mystery style movie. And I'm interested with the guy who wrote it to see if it's any good. So it should be fun. At the very least, we'll have a fun thing to talk about next week.
Yeah, I remember this being kind of like a fun kind of kid adventure mystery, but with like a little bit more edge because it is Sherlock Holmes, or at least a little more intellectual prowess. But again, I was like in middle school when I saw it, so we'll see how I end up feeling about it. But tune in next week for Young Sherlock Holmes. I'm Caleb Boatman. That's Caleb Koho, and this has been FilmograFeed. Thanks for watching.